Fighting at a high level in Fortnite is one of the hardest skills to master in all of competitive gaming. This is because it requires insane mechanical skill in terms of building and editing, world-class aim, and a high level of game sense. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the most crucial parts of fighting that pros master, but normal players often are very inconsistent at. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. Starting off with arguably the most important tip for consistent fighting improvement, we have making mental notes after every fight you're in. Mental notes are, very simply put it, things you say to yourself after a fight. What was good and what was not good. A lot of people understand how important this is when they get eliminated. They say to themselves what was wrong. Maybe they did a bad peek, a predictable play, or jumped in a box when they should have played patiently. However, what most people don't do is go over why their fights are successful when they win. After an elimination, think, what was good in that fight? Did I do good peeks, unpredictable moves, or something totally different? By making these mental notes, you give your brain a consistent feedback loop of good and bad aspects of your gameplay, and as a result, you'll see rapid improvement. Before we move on, I quickly want to give a huge shout out to GearUP. GearUP will help your ping get noticeably lower and more stable by optimizing your connection through the use of uncongested network routes. When I use GearUP, I go from around 60 ping all the way down to the 30 mark. Being able to half the ping I normally play on makes the game so much more fun and also way easier. Packet loss as well is something I've struggled with a lot, but luckily GearUP has an anti-packet loss feature that can get your packet loss down to 0. When I use GearUP, I go from having a few percent of packet loss consistently to instantly going down to 0, and it makes my game feel much more responsive. The beauty of GearUP is that it's effortless to use. With one click, you optimize your data and your ping goes down and stays consistent. It's also used by pros like Asian Jeff, Mero, and Day, so you know that this is an app to trust. And if you're playing on a console, no worries. GearUP also got you covered with their gaming router called HyperEv, which is the best gaming router you can get for under $100. If GearUP sounds interesting, you can test out the GearUP Booster or check out HyperEv by clicking on the first link in the description below. I've partnered up with GearUP many times now, and the feedback has been super positive, so consider checking it out. Circling back to how to W key like pros, this next tip is never losing sight of the opponent in the fight. Without having understood this fundamental, you will never be an incredible fighter. Now, having full awareness over your enemy is crucial for many reasons. The main ones being that you won't give him any opportunities to catch you off guard, and most importantly, you'll instantly see when he makes a mistake you can punish. The problem a lot of non-pro players have is that they have awareness over their opponent for 75% of a fight. In the other 25%, they may do completely useless builds and edits without having awareness over their opponent, just because they've seen pros do seemingly just that. But the difference is that pros, when doing these impressive builds and edits, maintains awareness, whether it be through audio, what they see, or even just game knowledge. In short, when fighting, always keep an eye on the enemy. Don't look at your builds and edits like a lot of people do. And never do a set of builds and edits that don't serve a purpose in the context of giving you a favor in your fight. One thing I do want to note here though is that when you watch pros play creative or ranked, you may see them do useless builds and edits for content. But if you watch them in tournaments that matter, you will not see that. So start practicing upon this fundamental today, and you'll also see that you'll improve faster. Another thing pros understand is just how much that first shot in a fight matters. Now, I'm going to call out quite a lot of you right now. Some of you like taking the first tag just so you can play defensively, because you know that you're better at playing defensively compared to aggressively. Now, if you have this mindset, your practice in ranked, creative, and tournaments will be extremely ineffective. This is due to the fact that the skill ceiling of playing aggressively is much higher than that of playing defensively. There's a reason all good players mainly play aggressively in tournaments. When playing aggressively, you have way more potential plays you can go for. It's tremendously much easier to maintain awareness of the fight, and you also control the pace. And talking about controlling the pace, that is exactly why getting the first shot off is so important. Because by winning that first shot duel, you'll be the one to set the pace. And in addition, if you're fighting on 200 health and you've tagged your opponent for nothing more than 50 damage, you already have a 25% health advantage. And that right there gives you the upper hand instantly. So focus on the first shot. Set the pace to a level in which you don't allow your opponent to breathe. Try to be an annoying player to play against who can finish fights fast. That's how you know you become a good aggressive fighter. Next up, I need to touch on one of the most important mindsets to have if you want to become a top tier fighter, and that is wanting to make fights as easy as possible. Now, this right here may sound weird, given that the best fighters in the world do things that look incredibly difficult. But although certain builds and edits may look extremely mechanically difficult when we're watching, those exact exact moves are easy in the mind of the pro player. It's not something he has to force, like a lot of mediocre players have to do when going for mechanically demanding moves in fights. So with your skill set right now, I want you to start focusing on making fights as easy as possible. You see, what happens when you do this is that you feed your brain with knowledge of how to win fights with moves that are replicable time and time again, and also moves that you won't ever fail at. Simple builds and edits that are effective will take you so much longer than incredibly mechanically impressive builds and edits that are inconsistent. Alright, let's talk about something totally different. How pro players have such amazing aim. What I want to focus on today is tension management. Basically, how much you tense your arm when aiming. This may sound like it doesn't matter all that much, but having bad tension management is often the reason why players never achieve good aim, no matter how much they play. And often also the reason why a lot of players do very good throughout a tournament, and then in the last game when things really matters, and maybe they're a bit nervous, they play worse, with more than usual, and go down early without having secured a lot of points. You see, what happens when you're nervous is that you tense your hand more than usual, and this will have a very negative impact on your aim, compared to if you have a very light mouse grip. The reason behind this is that when you tense a lot, your mouse movements become completely unrelatable to your prior aiming experience. You will never ever in a million years be able to put the exact same amount of tension on your mouse when aiming. However, if you have a very light and loose mouse grip, this becomes way closer to your previous experience. In addition, small shakes, trebles, and quivers come through in your mouse movements to a much bigger extent when you tense hard on your mouse compared to if you have low tension. So what I strongly recommend is that you start practicing upon having low tension when aiming. It may feel weird in the beginning, and you may very possibly have worse aim compared to your normal tensing style. But one thing I can almost guarantee for all of you watching is that when you get in the last game of a tournament you've done so well in, you will do better compared to if you have a very high tension grip on your mouse. Trust me on this. Your aim will become more consistent, smoother, and you'll find yourself hitting way more max damage pumps. Second to last, if you want to become as good as humanly possible at W keying, you need to know both how to apply pressure so that you force out a mistake in your opponent, and you need to know how to play calmly when you're low HP. Applying pressure can be incredibly difficult. People nowadays are very good at making space and getting heals off. However, if you utilize your weapons, your pickaxe, and good movement throughout a fight, applying constant pressure is doable. To me, the player that stands out the most when it comes to applying pressure at a high level in fights is Veno. He is someone who punishes every mistake you make. If you forgot to place a coin in your box and open an edit, there's a stair in your box instantly. He almost never misses a single build or edit, even when doing very impressive chains of them, and he makes every single bullet matter in his fights. On the other hand, when it comes to defensive fighting, there is no one that even comes close to the likes of Peterbot. In his mind, when he's low on HP, he constantly looks for any weakness to punish, and as soon as he sees an opportunity, he takes it without hesitating, even if he's on 1 HP. So if you want to learn to become truly good at aggressive and defensive fighting, I highly recommend watching Veno and Peterbot, because if you truly pay attention, you can learn so much from their way of fighting. Moving on to the last and arguably the most important tip by becoming as good as pros at W keying, we have finding good competition. Now, I'm going to share some information that may get my creator code taken away or even get me a copyright strike from Epic Games. But I'm sharing this information for educational purposes only as to what pro players and aspiring pros actually do. And I'm not by any means recommending you to follow what I'm about to say, since doing this goes directly against Epic Games' terms of service. But I believe in full transparency and that nothing should be gate-kept. The players who are the best at fighting in every region has played a ton of wagers, essentially playing 1v1s to 4v4s for money. And there are a few websites people do this on. You have the likes of Rivox.gg, BetterPlayerWin.com, and EliteTokens.gg, just to name a few. Now, I do need to note that these websites take ridiculous fees for the wagers being played, and I'm not a fan of the business model at all of what these websites offer, given that a lot of people who play wagers are unfortunately underage. But since I want to give you the actual truth and information about what people genuinely do to improve as fast as possible, here it is. The reason people play these wagers is due to the fact that when you're putting something on the line, you try your absolute heart out, and so does your competitor. What this results in is extremely high tier practice. Alright guys, there you have it. If you learn these things and put in an insane amount of work into the game, you have the potential to become one of the very best fighters in the world. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day.